So good afternoon, everyone. Good morning if you're joining us from the Western Hemisphere. And welcome to the afternoon session of the WTO RTA Data Dialogues. Let me just share the presentation. In fact, we have to start, not yet. So with me here are my colleagues, Rohini Acharya, Chief of our RTA section, and Rowena Cabos. And I give the floor to Rohini to give us the welcome remarks for the afternoon session.
Thank you. Good morning, good afternoon, good evening, wherever you are. Welcome to this session on which will give you some information on how we write our factual presentations and the kind of data that we ask for. So my name is Rohini Acharya. I work in the RTA section along with my colleagues Rowena and Pamela. And the objective today is really to show you the mechanics of the way in which we implement the RTA transparency mechanism, and specifically in the kind of data that we request and the reasons for requesting the data and how we analyze and treat the data so that we can then reproduce it and write our factual presentations. So I hope that the meeting is informative, and I hope it demystifies the process a little bit. We would also like to take this opportunity to see whether you have any ideas on how things can be improved or the kinds of challenges that you face and how we might assist you in overcoming some of those challenges. We do require and request a great deal of data, so I appreciate the fact that it's not always easy, and obviously everybody has different data collection methods. So please feel free to let us know what your big challenges are in providing the data to us. And if you have any specific questions regarding the way in which we analyze the data, those are most welcome as well. So I hand over to my colleagues who will walk you through the whole session. And I wish you a good afternoon in Geneva, evening or morning, wherever you are. Thank you.
So thanks so much, Rohini. Let me just share my slides. There we go. Okay, so this is the program as we sent to you, but just to let you know, based on the morning session, we are very much more condensed in terms of time, and I think we will probably finish by around 2:30, unless everybody. No, 3:30. Unless we get involved into some very detailed discussions on data. So we will be able to let you go by that time. I have here, sorry. Here. So I think Rohini has already talked about why we actually ask you to participate in this session. Basically, we wanted to give an overview of how we actually do the data processing and procedures in the WTO RTA section, so that hopefully it can inform you on how we actually use your data and how we treat it, and hopefully minimize the amount of very long email exchanges that we have to conduct with you, and meetings and calls and so forth, so that we can actually improve the data submission right from the start and not have to come back to you again and again to constantly recheck all of the data for us. So the flow for today, we'll start with a brief overview and the context of the WTO RTA data process and its basis in the transparency mechanism. And after that, we will dive right into exactly the kind of ideal data submissions that we would vastly prefer for you to send us, both for goods and services, so that we will not have to keep coming back to you again and again. And we have tried to prepare a so-called RTA cheat sheet, which we will circulate after the meeting, which can hopefully be a good reference for your data requirements. And after that, we will look at the common challenges to data processing that we encounter most often. And for this, we will actually take a look at the instances of the data submissions that tend to lead to a great deal of issues in the processing, and the most common questions that we actually receive from members when they are asked to verify the factual presentations that we circulate. And after that, we will open the floor for an interactive dialogue with you, and hopefully we can have a good discussion. Okay, so as you know very well, the work in the RTA section is based on the transparency mechanism adopted by the General Council in 2006, which actually aims to increase the transparency on RTAs and clarify and strengthen the notification obligation of WTO members. So how is it implemented? And again, I thank my colleague Alberto Osnago for this very good slide. So it first of all, members, while negotiating an agreement, are entitled to give an early announcement prior to ratification. However, upon ratification, they are then obliged to notify to the Secretariat the full text and data files of their RTA commitments, including the annexes, protocols, schedules, and methodology notes, if available, for the specific RTA. And we want to highlight that there is a deadline of 10 weeks after ratification, which is extended to 20 weeks for developing countries. So all of these data submissions and texts are then consolidated into a factual presentation, which is circulated through the WTO consideration process and presented to WTO members under the Committee for RTAs or the Committee for Trade and Development. So this whole process ideally should take place within a year after ratification. And after that, if there are subsequent changes, it's also notified. So the WTO RTA data process flow, I will highlight here because we actually wanted to point out to you where the areas of the data processing occur, which create the most challenges for us in terms of having to keep coming back to members, statisticians, in terms of verifying and checking the data. So the process starts with an RTA data request, which we send out to your delegates here in Geneva. And the data required for this is usually tariffs, imports, trade and services, and FDI, as well as movement of natural persons. So if data is available and submitted by the party, this is then treated as an official data source. But if no data is available, then we go to secondary sources, such as the WTO integrated database, the UNCTAD stat database for FDI, or the various national and regional statistical offices of the country or its region. However, if we look at secondary sources, this then creates some kind of discrepancies in the report, which may not fully corroborate your national data figures. So we really encourage you to send official data. Once this file is now consolidated, we then have to check if the data is in the correct format that allows us to process it. And if it is not, then we have to do some pre-processing transformations. And we will discuss this more in detail later, but basically it includes coming back to the member actually to, for instance, if the lines that are submitted in the data file do not include all of the tariff lines outside of those that are liberalized in the agreement, these lines need to be retrieved and submitted again to the Secretariat, or otherwise, if the data is submitted in an HS version that is not aligned with the MFN rates or the imports data or the preferential tariffs, then we need to align these different data elements together in the same HS version, which means coming back again to the country to request for a national correlation table. Once this pre-processing is done, then it's only then that we are able to actually start processing the data. So this is then used to generate the factual presentation charts and tables that we circulate to members, and then require them to verify prior to the presentation in the CRTA. After that, it's converted into an Excel database file, which is uploaded to the WTO RTA website. And this again requires another verification. However, the problem happens where there are issues found in the Excel that were not flagged in the factual presentation. So then the charts and tables in the factual presentation need to be sent back to the members once again to verify together with the Excel files in the database. So then we actually see that there is duplicate verifications of the same information that need to be requested from members. So the point really is that if we actually are able to submit the data in the correct format that happens at the start of this process, then we can really minimize having to come back to you with the same tables again and again and checking and verifying all of this information. So we just wanted to make a note that because members are also required to notify their imports and tariff data to the WTO integrated database, the difference between that database and the RTA is actually that the IDB is a regular annual notification of tariff and trade data. And this means that the MFN rates and actual preferential rates submitted to them, as well as the imports data, are always all at the tariff line, but in the current year. In contrast, in the RTA's submission, this information is specific to the notified RTA. However, if the data is already available in the IDB, then there is no need for the member to submit it separately to the RTA section. So part 2 is about the ideal data format that we would prefer to receive. So to do this, we look first, for example, at country A. In this case, it's one of the countries party to the agreement of the UK and Eastern and South Africa states. So, for instance, for this agreement, which entered into force on the 1st of January 2021, and this agreement is implemented between 2021 and 2022. We want to ask the question of what data actually does country A need to submit to the RTA section under trade in goods. So what is required is data at the tariff line level, which means it should be 8 digits or more. And for MFN applied rates, this should be for the year of entry into force, which in this case is the year 2021. And then we request the preferential rates that are applied to the partner country, which in this instance is the United Kingdom. And this would be for the years under the liberalization schedule, which for this is 2021 to 2022, which is from entry into force until the end of the implementation year. Thirdly, for imports data, we request it for the 3 years prior to entry into force. And if they are available, we also request for tariff liberalization notes, which accompany the schedule that further explain the categories or details such as tariff rate quotas that are included in the schedule. So ideally, we ask that all of these information be provided in one HS version. For instance, in this case, the version of MFN applied rate, which is in HS 2017. And that's it. So this request will come to you in the form of a data request, which you may have seen is an attachment that looks like this. However, we will go through this in the next few slides by looking at exactly each of the data elements required. So for instance, for goods, this is the template that we request. What are the important elements here? We would prefer that the tariff line is provided, the HS codes at the tariff line, national tariff line level are provided, including the description and the MFN applied rate as mentioned for the year of entry into force, and then the full liberalization timetable, as well as any additional remarks in terms of, for instance, tariff rate quotas, and then the value of imports from the partner country for the 3 years prior to entry into force. And then underneath, you can see the details for the data required. So here we have an example of fully filled in form. And what is important to highlight here is really that all of the data are provided in a single file, which is at the national tariff line level for each of the types of applied MFN rates and preferential tariffs that are required in the form, as well as including all of the tariff lines from HS chapters 1 to 97, and not just those that are liberalized under the agreement. So if the data is provided in this form to us, then in fact I don't think we even need to come back to you for this. Here is an example of a tariff liberalization note. So for instance, you can see that it explains how in HS chapters 25 to 97, there exist the following categories that are described thusly in the schedule. So it's very helpful for us if you include all of this additional information, as it further clarifies the schedule and provides us with details that we need to process the data. Now, in terms of services and FDI, the data is much more straightforward than for goods, for imports and tariffs. So basically what we require is the data for services in the BPM6 classification, both for global data and bilateral data for the last 3 years prior to entry into force. However, we also know that bilateral data is sometimes less available than global data. So we are conscious of this. And for FDI flows, it's inward and outward flows for FDI stock and FDI flows, and also both the global data and bilateral data. So, and finally, for the movement of natural persons, which is based on mode 4 of the GATS, we request the information such as number of persons and number of work permits that are issued. But we also know that compared to goods and services and FDI, this data is really much more difficult to provide for us. So we understand if it's not available. So here is an example of the data for services, FDI, and movements of natural persons that has been filled in very well. But here, for instance, you can see that really for bilateral data and for movement of natural persons, it's not as, it appears that the integrity of the data is not as credible as the ones for global data. So we really understand if this data is less available. So here we have actually prepared for you an RTA data submissions cheat sheet, which provides a checklist of basically everything I just discussed. And we will circulate this with the data requests that we will be sending in future. And we'll also talk about this in detail as a recap at the end of the session. But yeah, just to highlight here, I also included a completeness check as a bonus checklist, which my colleague Rowena will discuss in the challenges section of the presentation, for which we actually discuss how we look at the completeness of the data prior to processing it as one of the requirements for the data to be in the right format. So just another final slide, because we actually request this file quite a lot, especially for the delegates in Geneva that we need to email to request this from Capital. So a national correlation table is basically a correlation table that allows us to move from one version of HS, such as in this case 2012 to 2017, so that we can transform data that often, for instance, in the RTA agreements, the schedules that have been negotiated quite a few years prior to the current HS, the MFN rates of the current year, which creates usually a gap in the HS versions of the data that is submitted. So we really need this file to be able to process the data for you. So thanks so much. And now I give the floor to Rowena to discuss part 2.
Hello. Earlier, I've seen familiar names and happy to welcome you here in the RTA Data Dialogue. I'm sure that you're familiar with our process. For some of you who actually have email exchanges with us regarding the data requests. So now we're going to show you the common challenges to the data processing. So for the completeness checks that were actually mentioned by Pamela, this is the usual thing that we do whenever we receive the data. So at first we check, so if you give us the data on goods, we check the tariff lines, the description, and then we check whether the MFN upon entry into force is less than the preferential rates. So if this happens, then we needed to adjust the tariff, the preferential rate under the tariff liberalization. So for example, here in the MFN upon entry into force in which is in HS 2017 nomenclature, MFN in 2021 has 6%. Well, the preferential rate for 2021 is 6.7%, and for 2022 it's 6.1%. So for this, since the preferential are larger than the MFN upon entry into force, we adjust the rates to 6% for 2021 and 2022. Now, kindly note that we only do this just for the purpose of the analysis of the factual presentation report. But actually, for your data, it's not even modified because, of course, this is the concessions that you have agreed under the RTA. And then another part of the completeness check is for those lines, whether if it's not indicated which HS nomenclature it is, we need to check. So here we have at least we know the number of 6-digit lines per HS nomenclature. So for example, for HS 1992, we have the 5,018 lines, and then all down to HS 2017, which is 5,387. So at least for this, we know which HS nomenclature that you have given us. So we use the WCO concordance table. I'm just checking. So number two, sorry, the number two completeness check is for us also to check whether the preferential rates are decreasing over time. So for example, if 2021, it's at 6.7%, 2022, it's at 6.1%, and then all of a sudden in 2023, it's at 0%. And then 2024, it goes back to 5%. So we need to check why there are questionable lines, questionable rates in the liberalization period. So for this, we need to at least contact you again. Why we need the explanation why there is questionable rates. So in the first place, we wanted to really have the file containing the liberalization period, which was actually included in the agreement, which you have already have the tariff concessions with. So a sample of country X submission under the RTA data request, which we usually send once we receive the notification, we send out data request. And for this, we check the agreement. So we check which year is the entry into force, we check the liberalization period, and for this case, the UK, Central America, the entry into force is in 2021. So we're going to ask for the MFN for 2021. And then the liberalization is from 2021 to 2027 for Central America. So we're asking the Central American parties whether they can provide us the liberalization period for this preferential tariffs for this period. And then since this is under the UK, Central America, we're asking again the parties whether what they have already provided under the Central America is the same. Because if it's the same, then actually we don't need to ask for the data. And then we're asking also for the import data. If it's not in the IDB, then they need to provide us the import year that is missing from the IDB. So if the IDB already has the MFN and the import data, we don't need to ask this from the parties. So usually we ask the parties for the file that contains the liberalization period, which in this case is from 2021 to 2027. Here, I have a submission from the party, and it's indicated here in the Linea Arancelaria, the tariff line is at the 8-ticket level, and the MFN it's in a 2012 nomenclature. So under the EU Central America, the liberalization period is from 2013 until 2027, but we're only asking for the UK Central America, the liberalization period from 2021 to 2027. So that's why this is in bold. So it means that all we need to concentrate is for these columns. And the import data are also provided. However, in the IDB, since we already have the MFN, it's at the 10-digit level in a different nomenclature, which is 2017. So this is the problem. So we needed to ask again the parties, can you please clarify how come the preferential are at the 8-digit level while the MFN is at the 10-digit level? And then when they come back to us saying that, okay, you can use the 8-digit level, then what we need to do is shorten the digit level of the MFN. So usually we just cut it, the last 2 digits, and then we try to align it ourselves. But if we don't have the concordance table, it will be difficult for us. So there are still many unmatched tariff lines, even at the 8-digit level. So that's why we really need the concordance table at the tariff line level so that it would assist us in having a single file, having all of the tariff lines, MFN, preferential, and import data, all in a single HS nomenclature. So in the factual presentation report, all the data that you have given to us, we generate it, and we have several tariff tables, tariff-related tables. And the first table that we usually put in the factual presentation report is this, the tariff elimination commitments under the agreement. And here we show the number of tariff lines which are already duty-free upon the upon no, already duty free at the MFN level at the entry into force year, which is 2021 in this case. And then the tariff lines liberalized for under the agreement, which is for 2021, it's 31. And then 2022, 166 tariff lines. And then the rest, it's just a remaining dutiable line, which is 195, a total of 6,472. And then how come, the party would ask, how come if we send out the factual presentation report for comments, they would ask how come that the schedule says there should be 6,582. That's the file that they have submitted to us. While for us, it's only 6,472. And then another comment would be indicated as how come the liberalized lines in 2022 is 186, but in your case, it's just 166. So usually in the processing of the files, we have this TLS, the tariff line suffix. Kindly note that whenever we process the data, we follow the IDB processing. And this is already introduced by the IDB, and it has been done for many years and done across all the data, tariff-related data in the house. So the TLS and X-outs account for different total lines. And also for some lines which are already duty-free, these were already counted under the MFN and not in the year where it became duty-free. Because as I already mentioned before, while we process, we actually compare the MFN and the preferential rate. So if the MFN has a lesser duty, and in this case, if the MFN is already duty-free, then of course the preferential duty rates will be reduced to 0%. So that's why it's counted under the MFN. So what are the TLS? TLS is the tariff line suffix. So it happens, for example, in this tariff line 08051030, it's partly liberalized because one part, the 02, is already 0%, but another part, it's just excluded for 10%. And for us, we don't count it as two lines, we count it as one. And then all we have to do is just add a 00 TLS, which wherein we would need to do the simple average. So this 08051030 will not be a duty-free line, but it will be counted as dutiable line. And another case where we also use the TLS is for those seasonal duties for the tariff lines with seasonal duties. So for example, the 070820, the freshly chilled beans under the season 1 July to 30 September, it has a duty rate of 10%, while from October to June, it has a duty of 6.9%. And then we just do again the average, the simple average, and this will be counted as dutiable line. So the rest of the explanations on how we do the calculations in the factual presentation report and how we process the data, you can find it in the technical note on calculation of statistics for WTO factual presentation.
It's a new reference.
It's a new reference. So takeaways. Just submit to us the ideal data in a single file, the one that was actually presented to you by Pamela. So everything should be there, the MFN, sorry, someone's trying to join the room. So yeah, so of course, the ideal one would be to have the single file for the MFN, the preferential, the import data in one single nomenclature. And there's no need for us to do to ask you for a national correlation table because everything is in the same nomenclature. But if not, if one of those elements are not in the same nomenclature, we would need a national correlation table wherein we can do the alignment ourselves. And if in case the data is not available, please send us whatever data that you have as soon as it is available so that we can check right away, and then we can at least do some, we can contact you if in case there are problems. So please try to reach out for clarifications to us, Pamela, or myself with these email addresses. So again, the RTA database submission cheat sheet. At least I think this is prepared by Pamela. And we are happy to at least let you know that you can have at least check this, the elements, if the MFN duties, the year of entry into force, the fictional maturities, because usually, as I told you, if the MFN and the import statistics are already available in the IDB, we normally don't ask it anymore. But for some parties, they tend to just submit to us everything that they have in a single nomenclature, which is very ideal for us, even though we say that it's not needed, because it at least it lessens the back and forth of the email. If we say, okay, so no worries, no need to submit to us the MFN and the import, and then in the end it has a different nomenclature. And then if we send you the, for you to check, then you would say, oh, there's something wrong. So in the end, you have the data yourself. So if in case you have everything in a single file, just send it to us. It would be less work for us, but less work for you as well, because there would be less back and forth of the email messages. For the other data, the tariff liberalization notes, this is important if in case you don't provide us the full set of the liberalization period. It helps us at least to know what is the preferential rates for those years that are missing. For example, if in case in the head notes it says A, category A, and then category A would say, oh, it's already duty-free upon entry into force. Then category B, it would be duty-free after 5 years of entry into force. So at least we would have an idea of how the preferential rates are. And then, of course, if you have information of tariff rate quotas under the agreement, we would be happy to have this information in order for us to indicate it in the factual presentation report. So if the agreement also contains services, so we would need data on services, FDI, and movement of natural persons. Usually we have difficulty in having this data. So we have information from the WTO statistics and UNCTAD for FDI, WTO statistics for the global data of the services. And then if you have bilateral data, of course, we would be happy to have one, but if not, then it's okay. It won't just be reflected in the factual presentation. We will just put the global data. So yeah, so we already explained how we check the completeness of your data and how we, of course, we prefer to have the data from chapters 1 to 97, not only those tariff lines which are included in the agreement.
And the other two, no? In the completeness, it's fine.
Yeah. Okay. Thank you.
So right now, we're actually going to open the floor. Let me see. Oh, no, it's there. Thanks. Yeah, I think next one. So we open the floor for you to let us know if you have any general comments or clarifications from the presentation, or if you have any burning data concerns regarding the trade agreement you're currently discussing with us. And if you may have any suggestions to improve the data process and the exchanges with you, we would actually welcome that. So you can either let us know in the chat or you can feel free to take the floor. We give you a few minutes for that. That's fine. In the meantime, I think there are.
So this is a dialogue. So we're encouraging you to join us in the dialogue so that it won't be just a monologue.
But while we wait for your questions or comments, actually I have a question for Rowena, because Rowena, I'm very new to the team. I actually see this all the time where, not all the time, one time, where the preferential duties seem to be having diverging a bit from what we would assume them to be in a trade agreement, where they need to be going down to zero. Is that normal for a trade agreement, Rowena?
Yes, because actually for us, we asked for the preferential tariffs, which were already under the concession. So it's not the current preferential, but it's not the current preferential, but it's the preferential tariff committed under the agreement. So I have a sample of this. Yeah, here. So there was a submission to us, and then it has several cases where, for example, the rates for 2015, it's at 7% for the tariff line 09096120. And then in 2016, it became 0% until 2019. And then all of a sudden, there's an increase again of 2%. So when we ask the parties, how come this happens? Of course, they say that, of course, it's because of the current MFN. The current MFN is 0 at that point, so they adjusted the preferential. But for us, we're asking the preferential already committed in the agreement. It's not the current preferential rate. So we would rather have the decreasing rates of the preferential under the liberalization period. So for that, if you send us the preferential under which was originally committed under the agreement, then it would lessen again us asking you questions regarding this matter. Because for us, it would create weird it would create a different outcome in the tables that we calculate. And sorry.
Oh, also, Rowena, there's
Yes.
a country just asked me a question. And unfortunately, they do not have the full schedule of liberalization, the full preferential rate schedule that they committed in the agreement, because apparently the data is not available. Is this something that is normal for an RTA agreement?
Normally, when you negotiate, of course, you would need to have the full set of the preferential liberalization. So we're expecting that file. But if the country says sorry, we're actually, for example, here in this data request, okay. So for the data request, we say, country A, please provide the preferential duties for 2020 to 2027. And then for country B, we would say, please provide the preferential duties for 2020 to 2035. But then the country only gives us the data, which is not complete. It's only for 2020 until 2022. And then they would say that for the rest, they still don't have the information because they are reliant on the year-by-year basis. And for this case, the resolution is for us to have, again, the information in the annex of the agreement, where the tariff line has a corresponding base rate and category. So for example, what I said earlier, for example, 010121, it is under the category A, and in the agreement, it would say that it would have a preferential rate of 0% upon entry into force. So 010121, if the MFN is 10, and then it has a 0% for 2020. So for the rest, we're expecting it at 0%. And then category B, again, it would say it would be equally liberalized 5 years after entry into force. So we would know that we would have to calculate the preferential duties according to the category. But in the event that you have the information, we would preferably have the complete set instead of just, for example, in this case, just 3 years. Okay.
So Rowena, I have a comment from the chat. It's asking us for AFCFTA, there is still ongoing negotiations in the preferential agreement. So what can be done in such regard? So I think the question for us is a bit unclear. Could you please clarify what you mean in terms of what do you mean? Because this agreement still has not been notified to the WTO Secretariat. So, and in fact, we are not still in the process of actually issuing a factual presentation for it. But I think if your question is something else, please let us know. And again, yes, please, if you join the meeting using the link that I sent yesterday, please take a moment to rename yourself using the 3 dots beside your name so that we may know who you are. And especially if you have a question or a comment. Oh, yeah. Okay, let me just. Oops. Sorry, if somebody raised their hand, please do take the floor. I think you can unmute yourself and ask the question. Because this is the host. That's why you can see.
Hello.
Yes, hello, please.
Hello. Can I ask you a question?
Yes, please go ahead.
Yeah. My name is Sun Prasad. I'm from the Permanent Mission of Cambodia, and Cambodia is a member state, a member of regional trade arrange agreement within the ASEAN. And I see your presentation is look for me is a bit complicated, and it needs a long process to deal with the ASEAN member state. So I believe the ASEAN Secretariat is dealing directly with the WTO. Do you know about that, or it should be a single country who are a member of the WTO dealing directly with your unit in the WTO? Thank you.
Thank you for that question. Yes, actually, you're right. Whenever we send out data requests in relation to ASEAN agreements, it's the ASEAN who compiles the data from all of the ASEAN members, and then they would give it to us. But in case there's a delay, and if there are questions, sometimes we go directly to each of the ASEAN members in order for us to lessen the time of the back and forth. And then we try to clean the data and send it back to the ASEAN member. So actually, as you said, the presentation is quite confusing.
No, it's not.
Okay, it's not confusing. But anyway, just to simplify. So the thing is, when there's a notified agreement, we are we're supposed to send out data requests. If it's a goods agreement, just for the tariffs, the preferential tariffs that are committed under the agreement. So if we send out this data request, and then if the party sends out the data to us in an ideal format, then it would lessen the back and forth, and then we would clean the data ourselves, and then you would just need to see the tariff related tables in the factual presentation report once it's out. And then if there are questions, then we can try to sort it out with each of the ASEAN members. And afterwards, the data would be posted in the RTA database, and then you can see whether what we have processed is correct based from the data that you have provided to us. But of course, considering all of those informations that I mentioned earlier, wherein for us, we try to incorporate the TLS to simplify instead of having the repetitive tariff lines, we just try to retain the unique tariff line. So I think that's always one point where there are differences in the calculations, because the total number of lines tend to be different from your side and our side. But this is done across, this methodology is done across all the factual presentation report, and it has been accepted. Okay.
Hello. Yes, unfortunately, we really tailored the presentation for the people who are processing the information and are really quite familiar with all of the information and the data requirements that we usually request, but just that they do not see exactly how we process the data after they have submitted it to us. So we understand that there are different members in the audience from different stakeholders. There are delegates from the missions and then from capitals that are dealing directly with the data. So we have really prepared a very technical presentation that is targeting the statisticians that work on the data, because this is the kind of discussion that we need to have. But indeed, it is very specific to that audience, which is why we really encourage you also to encourage your statisticians in capital to join the next session on November 29th, so that we can have more detailed, more in-depth discussion on the data processing situation with them. So yes, unfortunately, it is really tailored for a very, very technical audience. So apologies for it. But if you have any questions that we can clarify now in terms of the higher level issues in the slides, we welcome it also. Please feel free to ask. We can, for instance, explain to you exactly what is some of the terms that we use in the slide. And I see Miguel has a question. Please feel free to take the floor.
Sí, buenas tardes, Rowena y Pamela, muchas gracias por presentación tan interesante. Dos preguntas. Las fuentes secundarias que utilizan para los servicios y el movimiento de personas, ¿cuáles son? Y la otra sobre la nota técnica. No sé si la nota técnica está en el... ¿Me escuchan?
Yes, sí.
Ok. Si la nota técnica está en el sitio web. Y la última, quizá tal vez, no sé, una recomendación es, o no sé si ustedes tienen un manual de buenas prácticas que le permita a nuestros colegas de capital pues tener ejemplos más concretos, así como lo han hecho en la presentación. Muchas gracias.
Thanks so much. Gracias, Miguel, for the question and the comments. Yes, indeed, as we mentioned, the technical note for factual presentations, it's not available on the website. We should make it available on the website, but currently we are actually attaching it to the factual presentations that we circulate to members at the stage where we ask them to verify the charts and tables in the FPs. So it is now attached as the factual presentations. And in fact, it details some of the things we discussed, but also a few more details, such as, for instance, what is a TLS, what is a quota, what is all of these technical definitions that we have just glossed over now. So that reference we will send out after this session. And we also invite you to again, encourage your colleagues in Capital to join us for the next session, which we will run at least again once more in November on the 29th. And because now I think you have a good idea of what exactly is being discussed in this session, and you can know right away if which audience is best tailored in capital to benefit from this kind of session. Go ahead. Go ahead.
So there's this comment from Brahim. It says that yeah, you would like to have a copy of the recording after the meeting. So yes, it is possible. Can give it to you. We can give it to all of the ones who attended. And then there's another question. It's regarding the AFCFTA. So it says that the AFCFTA is still ongoing, but I think it's finished.
In fact, there's another comment on AFCFTA after that, Wayne. No, it's bearing in mind, but not in yours. It's saying in the agreement in the AFCFTA, where you are not notified and come into force, such as this agreement, can such data or tariffs be forwarded to you? I think would you like to answer that, Wayne? It's not.
Actually, it was asked earlier, and since we follow the the transparency mechanism, the agreement should be notified to us first, so that for us, in order for us to ask for the data. So if it's not notified, then we're not obligated to ask data from the parties. I hope it answers your question.
Rowena, I received another question. So it's asking exactly how do you treat quotas in the processing of the data?
Okay, so quotas.
Okay, let me just give you. You have.
Yeah, so it's also included in the technical notes. So here, if the tariff line is subject to TRQs, the tariff rate quotas under the agreement. So for the in-quota lines, the 2%, it's not included in the calculation. It's just out of quota. The reason is because for most of the tariff lines under the quota, it shares the same tariff line. So it shares. So for example, 1604-2090, it has an in-quota rate of 2% and then an out-quota rate of 6%. So here we exclude it, and then it's just the 6% that is retained. For some tariff lines, the in-quota rate is at 0%, and then the out-quota is at the MFN level. And the reason why we're excluding it is because it seems like the tariff line has a preferential rate, where in fact it's just preferential within a volume, a certain volume. But if it's outside, then the product also receives the MFN duty, so it's not counted in the calculation.
Finally, Rowena, I have another question for you. When I'm looking at the tariff schedules, I see these different kinds of tariff rates, which are not ad valorem and they're not specific, but they seem to be combination of different kind of tariff rates. How exactly do you treat these mixed and compound rates?
Thank you, Pamela. So yes, for us, when we calculate, it's different. It's slightly different from what the TPR or the IDB does, because for us, I'm not sure whether you're all familiar. So for ad valorem duties, it's just those rates which are that has the percentage. It's 8%, and for the mixed, it's a mixture of the specific part and the ad valorem part in the product. So here, for example, the 0403-1053 has a compound duty, and because it says 8% plus and then the ad valorem, the specific part. And then for the 1704-1010, it has, again, a specific duty, but the maximum of 8%. So we just consider the 8%, and for the specific, we don't calculate for the ad valorem equivalent. That's how we do it in the factual presentation report, how we calculate for the averages. We only consider the ad valorem part. And as you can see in the last line, the 0, 8, 11, 10, 11, it contains, because the 0%, it's not included in the calculation, because of course there's a part where it still has a rate, the specific duty. So for here, we don't include it in the calculation. And usually, again, it's in the footnote of each of the tables in the factual presentation report. So yeah, we try to at least be transparent on how we calculate.
So Rowena, after the factual presentation and the Excel files of the RTAs are finalized, where exactly do we put this data? Do we publish it for the members, or is it freely available now for anybody to download?
Yes, for the files, once we process, and then it's included in the factual presentation report, and we send out to the parties for comments. And after they did comments, and then we finalize the file, we post it in. After we finalize the file, there's a committee wherein it will be discussed. The agreement will be discussed either in the CRTA or the CTD. So prior to that, we send out email telling the parties to please check the files posted in the RTA database, which includes the goods part and the services part. But we're more concerned for you to check the goods part, because this is the one that we did some processing. So it's posted in the RTA database website. So here, yes, so this is the link, the http rtais.wto.org. And then you can see, so if you select, for example, a particular country.
Right.
Yeah, so country A, for example.
Here.
So yeah, so if you select, for example, here, Indonesia. Yeah. Then if you click, there are several agreements which concerns Indonesia. And then if you click one of those agreements, Indonesia, Australia, so you will be shown a different window where it contains basic information about the agreement. And then the Excel files are here, the trade-related data. So yes, that's where you will see your data. So if you check and then let us know that you don't have any wish to modify, then we can freely put it in the database. Or if there's some concerns, then we would need to modify again the file. And in some cases, we would need to modify the tariff-related tables in the factual presentation report. So it's really very important to have the clean file at the beginning, so that we would eliminate the extra work also on your side. Thank you.
So I think we've received a lot of clarificatory questions, a few of them for myself.
Yeah.
Thank you so much to my expert colleague on RTAs. And just to summarize, yes, indeed, we have these helpful references that are now available. And thanks so much to our colleague Miguel for the suggestion that we actually make it available on the RTA website. But for now, let me just recap. So first of all, a video of this session will be prepared. And then the technical note on the processing of the statistics for factual presentations will be also provided. So again, this includes a lot of the details that we described in the presentation, including a few more definitions that were not really explained in detail. And it's very helpful to see that file actually beside the actual factual presentation when you are verifying it, because you can see right away where the tables, where it refers to the processing of each data element vis-a-vis the factual presentation. Finally, the cheat sheet that we prepared in one slide, we also will make this available because it's a good summary of exactly the checklist of things that need to be prepared for a full process of a one RTA commit of one RTA. In addition, again, we reiterate that we will have a similar session. This is a pilot session. Thank you so much for bearing with us. We will repeat the session at least one more time on the 29th of November, where hopefully you can encourage members from statistical officers such as ourselves or technical colleagues that are dealing directly with the data on tariffs, imports, services, and FDI to actually join the meeting remotely or in person if you prefer. You're welcome to join us so that we can explain to them the data process in detail, and the process becomes much easier for us and them when we again move on to a new agreement, and then we send out the data request to the delegates in Geneva, who then have to relay it again to these colleagues in Capital and send back the data to us in a vicious cycle of very long emails. So if everybody has any comments or feedback or suggestions or content that you would like us to include for the next session that might be interesting, please let us know. We give you maybe 3 minutes to think about this. Or please, if you're too shy, please let us know in the chat. Again, as we said in our takeaways, really the thing that we would like to highlight is we feel that it's very long, the emails we send you. So the data that we request may not, it's not immediately clear exactly what we're asking for. So it's helpful if you understand exactly what it is and how we use it. So this kind of dialogue is helpful for us as well to be able to see how you are faring in terms of all the emails you receive from us, and if there are ways we can improve the process. For instance, if the data is available in a different format, or if the data is available in the version in a single file, but it's not obvious to everyone that it is what we need, because, for instance, the trade agreement was negotiated many years ago, so those lines are not anymore available, but the file actually exists, just that we don't know that this is the file that helps the process move much quicker. So it's very helpful for us if indeed you send us all the files that you have ideally in one HS version. And if not, please do provide a national correlation table. Otherwise, please just send us whatever you have as soon as possible. And if not, please come over for a coffee and we can also talk about your RTA in detail. Or chocolate, we have chocolate. So thanks so much. I think we don't have any more comments. Thanks so much to everybody for joining us today. And indeed, we will circulate the details for the next session in November. It will be announced in the CRTA, in the next CRTA in November, and hopefully also in the CTD. And we will also publish it in the RTA website. So in the meantime, please stay tuned, and on social media, by the way. Please stay tuned for the files that I will send to you following this meeting. Thank you so much.
Thank you.
and we're quite happy. A lot of people actually are interested in this session. Thanks so much.